I'm not saying the mob doesn't exist, but they want to keep it low. They want to really keep it low. The last thing they want to do is meet with Donald Trump and have 500 paparazzi taking pictures.
Welcome back to AM Joy. That was Donald Trump in 1999, and this is Trump today. Video obtained and published by the Palm Beach Daily News shows Trump ringing in the new year with Joseph Cinque, a convicted felon with suspected mob ties who goes by the name Joey No Socks. Mr. Cinque's attorney told BuzzFeed News that Mr. Cinque is not and has never been a friend of John Gotti, nor does he now, nor has he ever had a relationship with, quote unquote, the mob. But back in 1995, an assistant district attorney who was prosecuting Cinque for art theft told New York Magazine that an informant spotted Cinque talking to Gotti during a chance encounter in court. The informant allegedly overheard Gotti telling Cinque he would, quote, take care of the DA. Cinque's past came back to haunt him and Donald Trump because of questions about mob ties from Trump's own past. In September, Mother Jones's David Corn recounted the history of Trump's connections to organized crime, writing, when asked about his links to the mob, Trump has repeatedly made false comments and has contradicted himself to such a degree it seems he has flat out lied about these relationships, even when he was under oath. David is back with me now, and so is Scott Dworkin, senior advisor for the Democratic Coalition Against Trump. You may know him from Trump Leaks all over your Twitter feed. David, I'm going to go to you first because we've got your reporting in that intro. Trump's ties to people, and we'll put up a few of them here, someone named Kenneth Shapiro and Daniel Sullivan, who leased property to Trump in Atlantic City. You got a guy named Felix Sater, who actually worked at the Trump organization. You got a guy named Robert Labouty, who's a high roller at Trump casinos, also apparently mob connected, and Fat Tony Salerno and Paul Castellano, who supplied the concrete, not the steel from steel country, the concrete that built Trump Tower. Are these ties incidental? Are these people he did business with? Are these people he knew socially? What is the connection, David?
Well, most of those that you put up are people who he did do business with. And, you know, some people will say anyone who did construction work in New York City in the 80s had to do business with the mob. Anyone who did business in Atlantic City in the 90s had to do business with the mob because these were mobbed up territories. But what's really important here is that Donald Trump again and again and again has lied or not told the truth about his connections with these people. And the best example I put in that story that you promoted there is that he was deposed in 2007 in a case in which he was suing a New York Times reporter about a book he had written. And he was asked in that deposition, have you ever had any associations with mob people? And he said, under oath, no, not at all, I haven't. 2 years earlier, in an interview to the same reporter, he was asked about his early dealings in Atlantic City, and the two people you mentioned up there, showed up there, who he bought his or leased his initial property for his first casino there. And in that interview, he referred to both of them as mob guys. He said one was a small-time mobster, and the other guy might have been involved in the plot to kill Jimmy Hoffa, the labor union who had mob connections. So you have this direct contradiction when he tells people he knows he's working with mob guys, but then when it comes up under oath, he says none.
Hold on, guys, because, Scott, I want to get you in a second. Just, you guys don't move. Stay right there. We have to go to this presser just for a second. We're going to go to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where officials are providing details on the airport shooting and that left 5 people dead. Let's take a listen.
Victims, and we are in the process of notifying their family members and loved ones. We have concluded the interview of the suspect. The suspect remains in custody and is currently held at the Broward County Jail on federal charges. We are working very, very closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and this afternoon the United States Attorney's Office will issue a press release in regards to the charges that the suspect will be facing. We are conducting interviews and investigative leads in numerous locations, not only here in South Florida, but really throughout several other locations in the United States. We've conducted roughly 175 witness interviews. We've recovered video, physical evidence, and we continue to pursue every investigative lead. We have not ruled out anything. We continue to look at all avenues and all motives for this horrific attack. And at this point, we are continuing to look at the terrorism angle in regards to the potential motivation behind this attack. At this point, I'd like to introduce the director of the airport.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Gale. I'm the airport director for the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And once again, want to start by expressing our condolences and sympathies to those that lost their lives here in a horrific event yesterday.
All right, that is the airport director that's talking now before you heard from the FBI updating you on their progress in investigating the shooting in Fort Lauderdale. Let's go back to the subject at hand. I want to get Scott Dworkin here. You've written a lot about, particularly in Trump Leaks, about Donald Trump's this period in the late 80s to early 90s when he was having a lot of financial trouble. It seems like a lot of the Russia ties and a lot of this sort of mob activity kind of dovetails in that same period. Have you been able to make any connections between his financial problems and some of these nefarious characters he was around?
Well, thank you, Joy. I think that one of the key things to note is that his father was tied with the mob, and during a Senate testimony at an FHA hearing, he admitted that there was 25% ownership of one of his companies by the mob. Donald Trump, in regards to the concrete, we found out he was willing to pay more for that concrete just to make sure that the unions stayed, what he said, stable was the word. So I think he accepts the fact that the mob exists. Whether or not he's had direct business dealings with them is not a question. It's very clear that he has. He has long-standing ties since he was born with the mob. So this goes back decades, and it's not something that has just popped up overnight. This also extends, obviously, as you saw Sater, that's a Russian affiliated person with the mob. So I think it's worldwide, not just here, to keep an eye on. But he definitely has extensive ties with the mob. A lot of his funding has come through the mob, and a lot of his work associates have been directly related with the mob or in the mob itself.
And, you know, David, it does beg the question why this was not highlighted more artfully or more vigorously by the Clinton side during the campaign, or even by other Republicans during the primary. It does seem like Donald Trump's history, which is easily findable. A lot of this stuff is in, you know, stories that are still online that you can look up right now. I wonder why none of this has come up more. And do you think that at this point, with him now about to assume the presidency, is there anywhere that this goes if we find out that he's got connections, for instance, to Russian mobster? There was a guy who was running, I think, an operation out of Trump Tower. Where does this go now that we have this info?
Well, that's a good question. You could probably ask that of about 12 different or maybe more subjects about Donald Trump and his past. I think there was a lot of good reporting done on some of his past ties, his business dealings, and whether mobbed up or not before the election. But they weren't. These subjects were not given sort of the email server, you know, approach or treatment. So they didn't seem to dominate or play much of a role during the campaign. I do think, you know, the fact that he just has continually lied about this matter or told false statements. I mean, you played him, you know, telling Tim Russert in 1999 when he was considering a run for president on the Reform Party ticket, you know, denying any associations with the mob. You know, months earlier that same year, he had practically bragged to an AP reporter for in an interview on another subject, saying, "Yeah, I've had to deal with the union, I've had to deal with the mob," and you know, as if he's a tough guy. So he clearly has this long record of inconsistent statements on this. And I think it's just part of the Trump history now. And if I were working for the FBI or the Justice Department, I might, and working on organized crime activities, or certainly anything involving the Russian mob, given the other issues out there, I'd be a little concerned.
Yeah, a little concerned, especially since your new boss, you know, who Comey helped to put in office, is not going to look kindly on any kind of investigations like that. Scott, on the question of why this matters now, do you have a concern that some of these connections that Donald Trump built up over the years, whether it's the Russian connections or these mob connections, could end up radiating into his presidency and into policy areas where the average American ought to be concerned?
You know, I think that people need to know that what's a lie and what's not, and that's why Trump Leaks exists in the first place. We're American run. We get all of our documents obtained legally, and everything's posted publicly on Twitter. I think exposing his scandals will make it clear that we can focus on the policy and the garbage that they're going to try and pour out, because a lot of these things are going to be distractions, and we cannot afford to have these distractions. We need to focus on the policies at hand. So as long as we can get these out of the way, I think that he's going to be under watch, and he's not going to be able to do as much. But if we want to talk about a mobster, I think Donald Trump is one of the biggest mobsters in the world. And that's the bottom line here. I think he is a mobster when it comes down to it. His business practices are that of the mob. He met with the FBI before he built the casinos in Atlantic City, and he said, "I don't want to tarnish my family's good name. I don't want to do anything involving my family's name." And he definitely has no interest in telling the truth about this matter. That's the bottom line here.
Well, he definitely is reflective of a certain thing called a Russian oligarch. If you look at them and you look at him, it's very similar.
Well, that's what we put together here. You have billionaires that are coming and taking over the country here. So what are we turning into?
Yeah. Well, we are glad that David Corn and Scott Dworkin, that you guys will be here to watch it all unfold and investigate it so that we can have you back on the air to talk about it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joy.